Alrighty, guys. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about your definition essay in terms of the structure. So, one of the things that you should be doing either for homework or maybe when you're all done with your classwork is starting to map out your definition essay. Last time we talked about the thesis. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the different ways that you can put this together. I'll also end up making a few notes for your book clubs today, and before you set out to actually begin and start moving into your teams for your book clubs. So, the basics of the definition essay in terms of structure is that I'm not looking for 5 paragraphs. There is no set kind of paragraph length that you need to do. You have to be somewhere around 3 pages. But just how many paragraphs you need in order to get there, that's really up to you. What you have to think about more is that the moves that you need to make in order to fully prove that your definition is valid. How are you going to convince your audience that the definition that you have come up with in your thesis is the best definition for marriage? So a couple of things that you have to remember is your rhetorical moves like pathos and logos, and how are they going to help prove your thesis, and where and how you are going to incorporate that into your paper, and also providing an opposition and how you are going to work with that opposition in order to acknowledge it, but also use it to further your argument. Remember that a paragraph is about 1/2 to 3/4 of a page. So that's a really good way for you to think about like where you need to break, because you can't have like 3 pages, 1 paragraph. You have to give your audience a break, basically, so that they can take a breath before moving on to your next idea. So you might want to think about paragraphs as being like ideas. And when you finished with an idea, it's time to move on to the next one. Okay. So that could be some tips for you in terms of putting this all together. So here is a sample structure. You can use this structure, you can use a different structure, but it has to make sense for the reader is essentially what you always have to think about. How can a reader logically understand your organization without getting inside your head? Okay. So you can follow this way. You should start with an introduction. Everybody should, no matter what. You should start normally with a hook, right? So you can tell a small story here, get your pathos in. You could start with logos, a fact, right? However you want to get started. Do an introduction to your topic, marriage, talk a little bit about it, and then move into your thesis statement. That's your intro, okay? Your second My second thing that maybe you can use is pathos, okay? Because pathos is arguably like one of the strongest rhetorical moves that you can make. People really, really are convinced through pathos. So you can go ahead and start right into it. And even though I say number 2, this doesn't necessarily mean paragraph number 2. This could take multiple paragraphs for you to talk about. It's up to how long you're going, okay? So tell a story or something that you have observed that is related to your definition. You can choose how personal you want this to be. If you want to get really personal and talk about things in your personal life, you feel free. These are things that I will be reading and I won't be sharing with anyone else. However, if you don't want to be very personal, that's fine too. You can think about maybe how you have observed different marriages. You don't necessarily have to be clear whose marriage you're talking about. There are ways that you can kind of go around and be a little bit more vague about who exactly you're talking about or what exactly you have observed, without necessarily being very personal. So up to you in terms of what you want to do. Okay. You could even talk about people that you know that are married that you don't even know, but you have observed their interactions when you're out at a mall or when you're at a movie theater or something like that, and how you've noticed like the way people act or the way people talk to each other. So it doesn't have to be like just your parents. Honestly, it could be even people that you don't really know, but you've just observed something that was really interesting. Okay. So you can end your story by pulling in a quote from one of your sources that ties into the observation you have made. This shows how your pathos is being backed up by your logos. Okay. Make sure to analyze a quote. Make sure all this proves your definition. Okay. So when you're bringing in your logos, analyze that and then connect it back. Another move that you can make, or you need to make actually, is your opposition. You need to present your opposition either by using a quote from one of the articles as your opposition. If you really, really disagree with something that one of the articles has said about marriage, use it and show how they're wrong. Okay. Or you can anticipate an opposition using this sentence starter. Some would argue that. So if you want to just make up an opposition, use that sentence starter. It's up to you. Concede. Is there any part of the opposition's argument that makes some sense? But further, how is your definition still the better way to define marriage? Okay. So think about that in terms of spending some time with your opposition. And lastly, you should return back to your rhetorical appeals. You don't want to end on an opposition necessarily. So you should do something like either bring in another point of pathos, maybe another story, maybe a little briefer than your other one, whatever you want to do. Maybe you want to bring in another quote, logos, and analyze that quote in relation to your argument. Something there to kind of like move away from that opposition and to bring it back to your point. Okay, so you want to make sure that you do that. And for your conclusion, you should sum up your argument. And the main point of your conclusion is to think about why your definition of marriage is important now. Why is this an important message for your audience? Okay, so I want you to really think about, in today's world, in the way people interact with each other now, in the way that people deal with each other now, either even thinking about outside factors such as gender or sexuality or race or heritage or culture, whatever. Why is this an important message now for your audience? Okay, so I really want you to think about possibly some outside factors that complicate marriage or that causes some tensions in marriage, and that's why they really need to think about your definition as being the best way. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Okay. As you're trying to work through this, my advice is to begin an outline for yourself today or sometime in the next couple of days. Is to begin an outline and start thinking about how are you going to do that. Follow my structure, maybe follow a slightly different structure, but it should be something like that. Okay. So if you have any questions, go ahead and email me. And I just also wanted to let you know, because I forgot to mention it when we were in person and we're in class, that you could be as positive or as negative about marriage as you want to be. If you think marriage is a great thing that needs to happen in American society, great. If you think marriage is stupid and that people shouldn't be so caught up with marriages and we shouldn't make this a norm in our society, fine. Just prove it to me. Show me why the way that you believe in this, why that's the best way to think about marriage. Okay. So just know that you don't have to necessarily be super, super gushy about marriage if you don't want to be. It's really up to you and it's up to your argument. Okay. So definitely get started and get working on making an outline for yourself to get your structure going. I want to shift really quickly to book clubs and some ideas to sustain conversation. Again, as we know from our first day, that book club conferencing can be awkward, but just know that I'm not expecting you to conference for very long, just about 15 minutes. It's a little bit different than what we would be doing in person. I really want you to stay on task during that time and talk about the book. So of course you can say hi to each other. Of course you can, talk a little bit, but get right on task because you don't have that much time, and let's be efficient and practical and move on. So really, really think about the book and what you want to say about it and work through it. Okay. The task will be posted after the 15-minute mark of when you guys start conferencing. I posted these sentence starters, building and challenging, last class as well on my slideshow about online book clubs, but I want to put them here again for you because I really want you to try to use 2 of these sentence starters today in your 15-minute conversation. These are great ways to further what people are saying so that you can go a little bit deeper into the text, and then also to oppose, but to oppose in a polite way. So to have maybe a different viewpoint. So take a look at these. Pause at this point and keep this up, and then go ahead and use 2 of these in order to try to further conversation a little bit more. Okay. And the last thing that I want you to be doing today is making sure that you incorporate quotes into your conversation. As we do normally, and as I usually find for you, quotes are really important to fully understanding the text. And so I want everyone in your book club today to share one quote that you find important or interesting or even confusing. Maybe it's related to theme, maybe it's related to characterization. Explain why you picked this quote. And slow down, give everyone the chance to find it in their book so they can highlight it. So it might take people, a couple of seconds to get themselves together and have the book at the right page. So give them that time to find that quote before you read it and before you explain it. So that way that they can process it. So slow down. It's okay to have a little bit of silence as people are trying to find things. Okay. So don't feel like you need to rush things as you go through this. That's about it. At this point, you can move into your team conferencing and begin your 15-minute discussion. I will be posting the task after that. And I will be visiting you all. I might not say anything. I might just come in and just observe and listen. But just know that I will be there in the interwebs, seeing what you guys are all doing.